October 24th, 1944, 08:12 hours, Leyte Gulf, Philippine Islands. Donnas Boyd felt the deck shudder beneath his boots, heard the scream of tortured steel, and watched flames erupt across oil-black water, then made a decision that would defy every human instinct for survival. The sea was on fire. Not metaphorically, not partially. The entire surface of Leyte Gulf burned with a viscous layer of fuel oil ignited by Japanese aircraft, creating a liquid inferno that turned water into molten death. Around him, sailors thrashed and screamed as petroleum flames clung to their skin. Above, the sky darkened with smoke from burning ships, and somewhere in that hell, men from his crew were drowning. Boyd was 23 years old. He'd grown up in the hills of West Virginia, learned to swim in cold mountain creeks, and joined the Navy because he wanted to see the ocean. Now he stood at the edge of the largest naval battle in human history, covered head to toe in burning gasoline, and faced a choice that would define the rest of his life. He could abandon ship, like regulations demanded, or he could swim back into the flames. What happened next would earn him the Medal of Honor and reveal something fundamental about the mathematics of heroism that the Navy would never forget. Leyte Gulf wasn't supposed to be a death trap. It was supposed to be a triumph. General Douglas MacArthur's long-promised return to the Philippines, the hammer blow that would shatter Japan's defensive perimeter and open the road to Tokyo. On October 20th, 4 days before Boyd's ship caught fire, MacArthur had waded ashore at Red Beach and declared into a radio microphone, "People of the Philippines, I have returned." But the Japanese had other plans. Admiral Suwaymu Toyota, commander of the combined fleet, had activated Shogo, Operation Victory. It was a desperate, all-or-nothing gamble. Lure the American carriers north with a decoy fleet, then send the battleships and cruisers of the Center and Southern forces through the Philippine Straits to annihilate the invasion transports anchored in Leyte Gulf. If it worked, MacArthur's army would be stranded on hostile beaches without supplies or reinforcements. If it failed, the Imperial Japanese Navy would cease to exist. By October 24th, the trap had sprung. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force, 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, and 13 destroyers, was pushing through the Sibuyan Sea toward San Bernardino Strait. The southern force, under Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura, was approaching through Surigao Strait from the south. And far to the north, Admiral Ozawa's carrier decoys were successfully drawing away Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet, leaving the landing area protected only by Rear Admiral Thomas Sprague's escort carriers, small, slow jeep carriers designed for anti-submarine patrol, not surface combat. The escort carriers were sailing coffins if battleships caught them. And on the morning of October 24th, Japanese aircraft from land bases in the Philippines began hunting them through the smoke and chaos of the world's largest naval engagement. That's when Boyd's ship came under attack. The explosion hit at 08:09 hours. Boyd was on deck, supervising the launch of a landing craft when the kamikaze came in low from the port quarter. A Mitsubishi A6M0 trailing black smoke, its pilot already committed to his final dive. The 5-inch guns tracked it, spitting shells at 850 rounds per minute. Tracers stitched the morning sky. The aircraft shuddered as 40-millimeter rounds punched through its fuselage. It didn't matter. The Zero hit the ship's superstructure at 320 miles per hour, its 500-pound bomb detonating on impact. The blast wave lifted Boyd off his feet and slammed him into a bulkhead. His ears rang, his vision blurred. When he pushed himself upright, he saw hell itself spreading across the deck. Burning aviation fuel, hundreds of gallons of it, had erupted from ruptured fuel lines and was cascading down the ship's sides into the water. On contact with the sea, it spread instantly, creating a floating carpet of fire that surrounded the vessel in every direction. Sailors caught on deck were engulfed in flames. Others, already wounded by shrapnel, tumbled overboard directly into the burning oil. The screaming started immediately. Boyd scrambled to his feet. His coxswain training kicked in. He was responsible for small boat operations, for getting sailors into landing craft and off damaged ships. He looked over the rail and saw men thrashing in the water, their heads bobbing between walls of flame that rose 8 feet high. Some were swimming, some were floating motionless. All of them were trapped in a ring of fire with no way out. The ship's loudspeakers crackled. All hands, prepare to abandon ship. Repeat, prepare to abandon ship. Boyd looked at the flames. He looked at his crew struggling in the water. Then he made a decision that defied logic, training, and self-preservation. Here's what Donnas Hank Boyd understood in that moment, a truth that no training manual could teach. Burning fuel oil creates a surface layer approximately 2 to 4 inches thick. Beneath that layer, the water remains relatively cool because petroleum is less dense than seawater and floats on top of it. If a man could dive deep enough, hold his breath long enough, and navigate blind through underwater currents, he could theoretically swim beneath the flames to reach drowning sailors. Theoretically. But the human body isn't designed to swim through fire. Gasoline burns at 495 degrees Fahrenheit in open air. Petroleum oil burns hotter, between 800 and 1200 degrees depending on thickness and oxygen availability. Exposed skin begins to blister at 118 degrees. At 150 degrees, second-degree burns occur within seconds. Above 200 degrees, nerve endings cauterize and flesh carbonizes. Boyd was already covered in burning fuel from the initial explosion. His uniform was soaked with gasoline. His hands were blistered. His face felt like it was being held against a furnace grate. And the rational part of his brain, the part screaming for him to jump over the far rail, to swim away from the flames, to save himself, was telling him exactly what his odds were if he went back in. Approximately 0. But Boyd wasn't thinking about odds. He was thinking about the radio man who'd shared his morning coffee, the gunner's mate who'd taught him how to splice rope, the kid from Nebraska who'd just received a letter from his pregnant wife, and how all of them were drowning 20 yards away while the rest of the crew abandoned ship. So he took a breath and jumped. The water hit him like a wall of molten glass. Boyd plunged through the surface layer of burning fuel and into the comparative coolness below, his lungs already screaming for air. Above him, the underside of the oil slick glowed orange and red, a liquid ceiling of fire that blocked out the sky. Below, the dark water stretched into blackness. Around him, debris tumbled through the current, shattered wood, twisted metal, pieces of the ship breaking apart. He kicked hard, swimming parallel to the surface, counting seconds in his head. 1, 2, 3. His uniform was weighing him down. Standard issue dungarees and a Kapok life jacket that was supposed to keep him afloat, but now threatened to drag him under. He ripped at the straps, tore the jacket free, kept swimming. 4, 5, 6. His lungs burned, his chest convulsed. The urge to surface was overwhelming, a primal command from the reptilian core of his brain that screamed, "Breathe, breathe, breathe." He didn't. 7, 8, 9. Then he saw him, a shadow thrashing above, arms flailing, legs kicking weakly. One of the deck crew, a kid named Kowalski, who couldn't have been more than 19. Boyd surged upward, broke through the burning surface layer in a shower of sparks, grabbed Kowalski by the collar, and pulled him under. The kid fought him. That's what drowning men do. They panic, they claw, they try to climb their rescuer like a ladder. Boyd had been trained for this. He spun Kowalski around, locked an arm across his chest, and kicked back down beneath the flames. 10, 11, 12. His vision was narrowing. Black spots danced at the edges. His muscles were cramping from oxygen deprivation, but he kept kicking, kept pulling, kept swimming toward the edge of the oil slick, where, according to the mental map he'd built before jumping, the fire thinned enough for a man to surface without being cooked alive. 13, 14, 15, 16. Boyd's head broke the surface of the edge of the flames. He gasped, hauled Kowalski up beside him, and sucked in air that tasted like diesel and death. The kid was coughing, retching, alive. Behind them, the ship was listing hard to port, its superstructure engulfed in fire. And between Boyd and that ship, still trapped in the burning ring, were 4 more men. He had a choice. He'd already done the impossible once. He'd saved 1 life. He could tow Kowalski to the rescue boat circling beyond the oil slick, let someone else handle the rest, and no one would fault him for it. But Donnas Hank Boyd wasn't done. He went back. Twice. 3 times. 4 times. Each trip was a descent into a version of hell that Dante never imagined. Each time Boyd dove beneath the flames, swam blind through underwater debris, surfaced in the inferno to grab another drowning sailor, and dragged him back through the fire to safety. His hands blistered and peeled, his face swelled from burns, his lungs felt like they'd been scraped raw with steel wool. But he kept going. On the second trip, he pulled out Seaman Davis, a machinist's mate who'd been knocked unconscious by shrapnel and was floating face down in the oil. Boyd had to dive 3 times to find him, had to perform mouth-to-mouth while treading water and flames, had to slap Davis's face until the man coughed up seawater and gasoline and started breathing again. On the third trip, he rescued 2 men at once, a gunner and a radio man who'd grabbed onto a floating piece of debris and were using it as a shield against the flames. Boyd tied a rope around his waist, swam out to them, looped the line under their arms, and had a destroyer's crew pull all 3 of them through the fire like fish on a trawler's net. On the 4th trip, he found Kowalski's buddy, a kid from Texas who'd taken a piece of shrapnel through the thigh and couldn't swim. The wound was bleeding badly, staining the water red. Boyd wrapped his belt around the leg as a tourniquet, hoisted the kid onto his back, and kicked toward safety with legs that no longer wanted to obey. By the time he reached the rescue boat, Boyd's uniform had burned away in patches. His skin was black with soot and red with burns. His lungs felt like they'd been scraped raw with steel wool. But 5 men were alive because of him. 5 men who wouldn't be listed as casualties. 5 families who wouldn't receive telegrams. 5 futures that existed because a West Virginia coxswain decided that burning alive was an acceptable risk if it meant someone else got to live. The ship's doctor was cutting away Boyd's uniform, cataloging his injuries. 2nd-degree burns across 40% of his body, smoke inhalation, exhaustion, early signs of shock. The prognosis was grim. The doctor didn't think Boyd would survive the night. Boyd survived. The Medal of Honor citation would later read, "Though covered with burning gasoline and with complete disregard for his own safety, coxswain Donnas Hank Boyd courageously delayed an escape and exerted great effort to save his crew." 72 words to describe an act that transcended language. Boyd spent 6 months in a Navy hospital recovering from his burns. His hands never fully healed. The scars remained for the rest of his life, a topographic map of fire etched into flesh.
He was discharged with full honors, returned to West Virginia, and never spoke much about what happened at Leyte Gulf. When reporters asked him why he did it, he gave the same answer every time. They were my crew. Not complicated, not philosophical, just a simple statement of responsibility that defined everything about the man and the moment. But here's what Boyd's actions revealed about warfare that no tactical manual could teach. The outcome of battles isn't determined solely by firepower, strategy, or technology. It's determined by individual human beings making split-second decisions under impossible conditions, and sometimes those decisions defy every logical calculation. Boyd's rescue didn't change the strategic outcome of Leyte Gulf. The battle was already won by the time he pulled the last sailor from the flames. But his actions changed something more fundamental. They proved that even in the chaos of the largest naval engagement in history, even when ships were burning and men were dying and the entire Pacific theater hung in the balance, one person could still make a difference. 5 lives, 72 words, one choice. After Leyte Gulf, the Navy began studying the mechanics of rescue operations in burning oil slicks.
They analyzed Boyd's technique, the underwater swimming, the breath holding, the use of debris as shields against surface flames. They tested different methods for penetrating fuel fires. They developed new protocols for damage control and abandoned ship procedures that incorporated lessons learned from sailors like Boyd who'd improvised solutions in the chaos of combat. But the deeper lesson wasn't about tactics. It was about leadership. Boyd was a Coxswain, enlisted rank, not an officer. He had no formal authority to order men into rescue operations. He had no strategic training, no command experience, no place in the official chain of command. But when the moment came, he led by example in the most fundamental way possible. He went first. That's a different kind of leadership than what's taught at Annapolis or practiced in war rooms. It's not about giving orders or formulating strategies. It's about demonstrating through action that some things, the lives of your crew, the integrity of your oath, the refusal to abandon those who depend on you, are worth more than survival. The Navy gave Boyd the Medal of Honor because regulations required a formal recognition of extraordinary valor. But the real medal was watching 5 men walk off that destroyer alive. That's the only reward that mattered to Donnas Hank Boyd. And it's the only lesson that history needs to remember. Leyte Gulf was the beginning of the end for Japan. The battle destroyed the offensive capability of the combined fleet, opened the Philippines to liberation, and set the stage for the final island-hopping campaigns that would culminate at Okinawa and the atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Strategically, it was a turning point. Tactically, it validated every lesson the Navy had learned about carrier warfare, amphibious operations, and coordinated fleet actions. But for the 5 men Boyd saved, Leyte Gulf meant something different. It meant going home. It meant sitting on a porch in Kansas or Texas or Pennsylvania and watching grandchildren play in the yard. It meant growing old, feeling the weight of years, and knowing that every moment after October 24, 1944, was borrowed time, a gift from a coxswain who decided that his life was a fair trade for theirs. Some of those men became teachers. Some became factory workers. Some went back to farms and raised crops and never told their families what happened in the burning water off the Philippines. But all of them carried the same debt, the same knowledge that they existed in the world because someone else had been willing to burn. That's the mathematics of heroism that Boyd understood. Sometimes the equation isn't about maximizing survival or minimizing risk. Sometimes it's about accepting certain death as the cost of saving others and going forward anyway. The Medal of Honor sits in a museum now, bronze and ribbon behind glass, with Boyd's name engraved on a plaque beneath it. But the real monument to Donnas Hank Boyd isn't metal. It's bloodlines. It's the descendants of 5 sailors who lived because a 23-year-old coxswain from West Virginia swam through fire. It's the teachers who never existed, the engineers who were never born,
the artists and doctors and fathers and mothers whose entire existence traces back to one man's decision on one burning morning in the largest naval battle in human history. That's the legacy that fire couldn't destroy. Here's what the Navy learned from Boyd's actions and what every generation since has struggled to understand. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's not fearlessness or recklessness or stupidity. It's the ability to recognize that fear is irrelevant when measured against responsibility. Boyd was terrified. His hands shook when he jumped into the flames. His mind screamed at him to stop, to turn back, to save himself. But he kept going, because 5 men were drowning, and he was a coxswain, and coxswains don't abandon their crew. That's not heroism in the Hollywood sense. There was no dramatic music, no slow-motion shots, no moment of triumph. It was just a young man doing his job under the worst possible circumstances and refusing to accept that some lives were expendable. The fire at Leyte Gulf burned for hours, but the decision Donnas Hank Boyd made in those first terrible minutes will burn forever. Not in flesh, not in metal, but in the collective memory of a Navy that learned what true leadership looks like when everything is on fire and the only choice is between comfort and conscience. He chose conscience, and 5 men lived. That's the only truth that matters. That's the story that needed to be told. And if 73 years later we're still talking about the coxswain who swam through burning fuel, maybe it's because we recognize something essential in his choice, something that transcends tactics and strategy and military history. Maybe we recognize ourselves in that moment, standing at the edge of flames, knowing the cost, understanding the odds, and jumping anyway, because someone has to, because the crew is drowning, because that's what it means to be human when everything else is on fire.